How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm doing
Yeah.
well. I am really, really excited to get to talk to you.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. It's been a long
Between
time coming.
yeah, between you and Rachel's stuff, I feel like y'all are some of the horror authors that I've read the longest in terms of like my horror journey.
Aw.
So it's incredibly awesome that I've been able to talk to y'all this year. But for anybody who doesn't know you, you are a horror author and you have
Correct.
written such books like Mary and Nestlings. But we're here to talk about your new stuff today. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself with some of your other stuff that people should know about you from with
Oh,
your
sure.
you do writing on Broadway, correct? Is that correct?
No, I've never been on Broadway, but
Not
I've
Broadway.
done off Broadway.
Okay, okay. Well, tell us about that. Tell us about everything.
They're very specific terms in my industry and location, so we have to be very precise.
I understand.
To not claim false Broadway valor. Um, yeah, I'm an actor. I'm a playwright, or kind of retired playwright. I don't really write plays much anymore, but I might one day. Again, who knows? It's a nasty habit. But that's where I come from. And yeah, I do a fair amount of TV as an actor. What else? What else? I'm a musician. I'm a Libra. My birthday is tomorrow.
Wait,
Um,
really?
it is.
Oh
It
my
is September
God,
25th.
Nat. If I would have known, I'd have gotten like a cupcake and a candle and we could have sung and all.
Well, I'm glad I didn't let you know because nothing is worse than just sitting there when someone is singing you happy birthday.
Okay,
That
yeah,
is
that's fair.
that is
That's very fair.
torture.
That's
Um,
fair.
but yeah, no, I'm of the age where birthdays are kind of uh incidental. Like I have to like do math to remember how old I am because I'm over 40 now. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be 43, which I only know because I've already said that today. But like once you're just in your 40s, it's like, what year is it? What year was I born? How old am I? So we're not missing much as far as celebrating goes. I don't think.
Uh, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway.
Just buy my books, people. Buy my books.
Yeah,
Celebrate my
for real.
birthday that way,
Yeah, the best
please.
present, the best present. So in terms of upcoming things, between you and Clay, I think that y'all are some of the busiest people in horror. Um, you've had two chapbooks come out earlier this year with Shortwave. The Art of What You Want, and the other one was Generation. Both of those, wow. Um, I love them both, but your
Thank you.
fiction is very different than what I've come to read in your long fiction. And I'm kind of curious, like, your approach to when you sit down and write a piece of short fiction, what that's like for you.
Yeah.
If it's different in any way at all from your long works of fiction.
It is. It definitely is, and I'm glad you pick up on that because I mean I've never really talked about it out loud before, so I'll stumble through an answer. My sort of general approach, I tend to find short fiction and short plays as well, and appropriately enough, Art of What You Want and Generation both started as short plays. They were both little like
Right.
10-minute plays. Um, I love and grew up reading uh, short stories by Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont and Robert Bloch, and they tend to tell a very specific kind of story, and
Yeah.
obviously Stephen King as well, who was influenced by all those guys. But they tend, especially like Charles Beaumont and Richard Matheson, and Bradbury to a lesser extent, they tend to approach short stories in a similar way to like joke writing almost.
Yeah.
It's very similar to like the EC
Yeah.
Comics vibe, which I was also a huge fan of growing up. Um, Although they were old when I was growing up. I'm not that old. But they tend to be at least somewhat moralistic, and they tend to like have a character commit a sin and then have like some sort of payback, some sort of karmic payback that
Yeah.
functions as like a punchline to the setup. And much like a joke, it's got to be a punchline that feels at once fitting but also unexpected, and a little ironic. And I just always loved that about short horror stories like that. And so similarly, when I sit down to write a short piece, usually that's my default. Like I want something a little something that ends with like a bah,
Yeah.
and something that's like a little sideways and askewed, and anything I write tends to be like character centric
Hmm.
anyway, character
Yeah.
forward anyway. and you get less of an opportunity to do that in the short form. But I try and find like some way to at least honor that, as opposed to the longer length stuff, where the mission statement is usually like, I want to tell a story that first of all can justify that amount of words, that amount of time. It needs to be a character that's complicated and going
Yeah.
on like a character journey. They need to be different by the end than they were at the beginning, and the premise has to be able to sustain a bunch of different set pieces and things like that. Um, and so, like, I like to use novels in full length format and full length plays as well to explore issues and ramifications and consequences and different shades of a thing, as opposed to a short story where it's just like, I want to be nasty and sometimes just mean and gross and get in and get out. As you have noticed reading my little Christmas story in The Darkest Night
Oh, I
and
love
those
that.
chapbooks, like I am much meaner in short form than I am in the longer ones.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it mean. I'd just say like you're probably a little bit more aggressive in terms
Yeah,
of like
yeah,
of getting to the point a little bit quicker, obviously because it's short fiction. But to bring up I think it's Nice titled in The Darkest
uh-huh.
Night is the name of your story. And I read that today and it's it's sticking with
You're
me a
still
little
talking
bit.
to me.
Yeah. No, I really love it. And like for anybody who doesn't know, like basic premise, no spoilers. It just involves an elf on the shelf and that's all that you need to know. Like just know that it's a anthology of horrors in the cold and in Christmas and all these things. And Nat chose to write about an elf on the shelf. And
And a boy who loves Santa.
yes, so
Loves
much.
Santa.
So much. But like to your point that you were saying whenever you approach these stories, the kind of the comical way, like the formatting, I can 100% see that because it's like you land a punch, like at the right time. Timing is everything. And
Yeah.
that's something that I noticed in all of your short works. And I'm like, you couldn't have written that better to land that twist or that, like, oh, it's like a oh shit
Oh, thank you.
moment for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. Like,
I love
oh,
an oh shit moment.
yeah, you've had I think in The Art of What You Want and in Nice, there was a moment where I was like, "Oh, he's not gonna go there, is he?" And then like the next paragraph you did. I was like, "Oh shit." But it's so much fun. It's so much fun to have that
Oh,
reading
thank you.
experience. It's a really entertaining time. So I'm really excited. Are there more chapbooks coming from you
There
from
will be,
Shortwave? Okay.
yeah, there will be two more in 2025.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, we don't know when,
Yeah.
because I haven't written them yet. But there will be at least two more through Shortwave. There was one already compiled in a different collection called Human Monsters that came out
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
last year or the year before. I forget what year it came out.
Yeah, time's not real.
Yeah, exactly. It came out before.
Yeah.
And that's another really nasty one. That's a really fun collection as
I'm
well.
gonna yeah, I'm gonna have to get my
Um,
hands on that one.
yeah, it's really good. And I feel like there's a couple other short stories bouncing around. I have a much different short story. Oh, yeah, no, I can sit. There's the Stephen King The
Yeah.
Stand anthology that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
coming out.
yeah.
He mentioned that I'm in it, so I feel like I can say
Oh yeah.
that I'm in it. That story is much different. That story is
Yeah.
just like very weird, um, kind of Stephen King appropriate sort of
Yeah.
story. I don't want to spoil that too much, but that's coming out um, next year.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's like one or two other short stories that I'm not remembering that are out there somewhere, but people will find them. I love shorts. I really want to do a short story collection too.
I
Like,
would love one from you. Like I
yeah.
think that it would be kind of like a case of whiplash. Like you'd finish one back to back to back, just like be stunned the whole entire time. But kind
I
of
love
whenever
that. I love short story collections like that, where it's like,
yeah,
I
me
remember
too.
reading like Night Shift and being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, it's just when you can have like that many different punches to the face. Oh,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, I don't think that I've talked about it before, but I kind of struggle sometimes with short fiction, especially whether it's collection or anthologies. Just kind of like the quick turnaround that you have. If it's not something
Yeah.
that really grabs me, then I just kind of struggle with like keeping momentum in reading those collections and stuff. But like Mariana Enriquez's A Sunny Place for Shady People,
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my God, like that I have not
I'm
shut up
so
about that
excited.
book.
Oh
Um,
yay.
it is so, so good, and that was one that was, like, one after the other was just,
She's
insane.
so great.
Oh, so and, like, I hadn't read her short fiction, I'd only read Our
Oh
Share of Night
really?
at the beginning of the year, so this was actually my first instance with short fiction with her, and so then I immediately went
Yeah.
out and bought her other 2 collections, so I'll get to those
They're
eventually.
really good.
Yeah, that's good to know, that's what I've heard. Um,
If you like that, you should definitely check out uh Nadia Bulkin's She Said Destroy? It's sitting right up there. For some reason I'm blanking on the exact name and I'm not seeing it on my shelf and I know it's like right there. Yes, there it is. She Said Destroy is
okay.
really good.
Okay, I'm gonna
Really,
have to
really
make a
good.
note of that one and get my
Yeah.
hands on that one. So that's good to know. But back to you, because this is about you.
I
So
guess.
the big kind of upcoming release, as of now, this is the end of September when we're talking, is Shortwave is publishing Rest Stop, a novella. Yes, right. That's excellent marketing. Good job.
Right? Just like to keep
Product
whatever's
placement.
next right there. Oh, this old thing?
So casual. Um, so do you want to talk a little bit about what, Rest Stop is about, your inspiration for, I mean, just kind of like the blanket general question. If you want to open
Cool.
up the floor about Rest Stop, we'll go from there.
Totally. Yeah, it's a fun sort of segue from the short stories too, because I love how in novella format you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It's short enough that you can still kind of just have like a mean old fun time, but you get the room to like actually have like a character sort of deep dive, and you can have like I don't want to say slower because you never want like something to like drag or anything like that, but you have a little bit room to breathe to like get to know who you are torturing. uh and, and it is kind of a torturing sort of story. It is sort of my attempt at writing like an extreme horror story. It's not extreme for people who like don't get with extreme. I don't think I am doing an extreme horror story. I don't think I quite go that far. But for me, it's definitely like the most like unremitting sort of locked room
Yeah.
punishing ordeal through a character's perspective sort of story that I've written. Um, yeah, it's the comps I like to use for it are it's Gerald's Game meets Green Room. It's just a
Yeah.
guy who's trapped in a room by someone who is doing some very horrible things to him, and he has to figure out a way to survive and escape, and also come to terms with why this is happening, which is not apparent from the get go. And yeah, the basic premise is a sort of schlubby, slackery kind of musician is making a middle of the night road trip to go visit his grandmother, who he can't stand and who just had a stroke. And he's been putting it off because he doesn't want to go to her bedside, and she's just a real piece of shit who's always been, just unpleasant to be around his whole life. And now that she's dying, it's like, oh, I gotta go see her. And so he's put this drive off for hours and hours and hours. It's like 3 in the morning or something like that. And it's just midnight highway all around him, not another soul. And he decides to stop at a just random gas station to use the bathroom to buy some snacks. And uses well, first he walks into the rest area, the convenience store, and he's a little unnerved that it's completely empty. It looks great, it's very clean, it's very modern, it's very wonderful, but it's empty. And that kind of unnerves him because there are cars in the parking lot. But then he decides to just use the bathroom and get out of there. And as soon as he goes into the bathroom, finishes up in there, he discovers that someone has now locked him inside of the bathroom. And the night proceeds to get worse from there. And he has to find a way to survive.
That is it. That is a excellent,
Yeah.
very atmospheric summary, basically, without giving anything away of what Rest Stop is about. And there's something that you kind of touched on whenever you were describing it that I think is really important is you were like, oh, well, it's just kind of like a guy trying to survive
Yeah.
all this nastiness. Um, the rest stop is so much more though. And I'm gonna do my best to avoid spoilers if I can help it. But you know, I think one of the things in general about your work, whether it is in the short or the long form, is the duality of it in the sense
Hmm.
that yes, it works on the horror level, the entertainment, it's gross, it's scary, it's, whatever you want to call it. But then if you want to get deeper with it, you definitely can. Um,
Thank you.
and there's a very biblical sense to
Yes.
rest stop, a very like cosmic, and I hope that's not too much of a spoiler, but the realization of what's happening, his name's Abe, in
Hmm.
this moment is very it's got huge ramifications for him mentally and his life and kind of coming to terms with where he's at. And so I just kind of wonder, you kind of touched on it with Mary because you're somebody
Hmm.
who writes with a lot of personal experience that I've come to, realize, and same with Nestlings. But it's never in a way that you're like, well, my name's Nat and I've been through this and we're going to talk about it today. It's a really graceful way of
Oh, thank
like
you.
of, talking about these things. And so I just kind of was curious, your approach to these things because I do
Hmm.
feel like you do put a lot of yourself into your work. What's it like to sit down and write something and think, "Okay, maybe I'll unpack this a little bit more with this story." Is it a conscious choice? Is it something that just kind of happens?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I have a really hard time, even just like on a workflow kind of basis, on like a getting the work out onto the page sort of basis. I have a really hard time doing that if I don't feel like I'm saying something about an experience or a an observation or a trauma or something historical or anything like that that is personally compelling to me.
Yeah.
And particularly, I tend to process things I've gone through like a fictive lens.
Yeah.
Nestlings is probably like the clearest example of that,
Yeah.
in that it was like my wife and I had this horrible year, and a lot of that goes like almost directly into the manuscript itself. With that distance, as that I'm very grateful that you pointed out. Like it's never just like this is what happened, and I'm just gonna. It happened to Matt instead of Nat. Because I love to like play around with it and build things on it and stuff like that. But that will usually be the foreground. And I suppose to some extent that comes from my background as an actor, and training and whatnot. Or maybe the reason I became an actor in the first place is because that sort of thing compels me. It's hard to say which is which. But my training as an actor was very much in like the Stanislavski mode. It was very classically oriented, as opposed to like method.
Yeah.
And one of the like big tenets of the training that I received was to the great Stanislavski what if. What would I do if I were this character in these given circumstances?
Yeah.
Which is then not meaning suddenly I am that character, but what would I do? And then you let that inform the
Mhm.
character, who then has their own different response that is not yours, but is informed by yours. I tend to write the same way. Like, what would I do if I were in this situation? Uh, what have I felt in moments that are similar to this? What can I understand personally through these sort of moments? There's a great writing quote that I can never remember who said it, but it's a play on the old, you know, sort of bullshit idea of write what you know,
Yeah.
which can be, I think, a very like limiting sort of mindset if it's taken very literally,
Mhm.
which I don't think it's intended to be. But this quote that has always resonated with me because I first encountered it when I was like 13 or something like that. But it's writing is the process of discovering what you know, and I like
Mm.
that a lot
Yeah.
more. Like there's a process to this kind of creation, and so that's why I like to dump my own shit at its door and then say like what am I going to learn about these sort of things? What am I going to learn about playing with this stuff? What's in it for me? Uh, and yeah, so like it was like Rest Stop is kind of the most, or one of the most explicit examples of this. But even when I was a playwright, I think I'd been playwriting for about 11 or 12 years or something like that, and I was a very like productive playwright. So I
Hmm.
tended to write like 2 full lengths a year, a bunch of short plays a year, and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
I had a pretty decent sized catalog by this
Hmm.
point. And someone had asked me like, is there a like unifying thing to all of these plays? And I really enjoy being very varied and eclectic and things like that. And one's a sci-fi play, and one's about cannibals, and one's about the President Franklin Pierce, and like just all these different things. I love to have them each be very different from each other. Uh, but then I realized a universal theme to almost everything I've written is about man's relationship, and I mean that in a non-gendered way,
Yeah.
just like humans' relationship to God, to a concept of God,
Hmm.
to a divine presence, whether or not that's literal or it's just kind of a figurative relationship to like the powers that be or something more cosmic, like you said.
Yeah.
That's just something that has always really compelled me. And Rest Stop, uh, by taking this very simple story of a guy, being locked into a shitty little bathroom by some psychopath, maybe. Uh, just it seemed like a great sort of springboard for those questions that I think we all deal with. I know I certainly do, and I was certainly raised in a household that constantly questioned these things. Why does this happen? Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Why do bad things happen to good people? I think
Hmm.
we had that book on our shelf
Yeah. Yeah.
when I was growing up. And I'm a third generation American. My grandmother came here from Poland, fleeing the pogroms there, and we lost family members in the Holocaust, and like that was just kind of hanging over the household when I was growing
Right.
up. Anyway,
Yeah.
just my mom was obsessed with that question of like, how could that have happened? Why did that happen? So that I take that question as almost like a a mission statement whenever I like try and tell a story of like why would this happen, and uh, what what would you say if you can confront the engineer behind making this
Yeah.
happen? So it being a story about a guy named Abraham was like
Yeah.
very intentional.
Yeah. I I in some ways I wish that I could have like read this story. I went to Catholic school for like 14
Mm.
years, like pre-K to 12 Catholic school. Um and it was rough. But we had like our senior year, we had like it was called apologetics, and it was for a
Wow.
semester. We had to get up and defend. I mean, I'm really no longer Catholic. I'm really it's not for me. But we had to get up and defend our faith, that why Catholicism was the right faith in the world and
Wow.
all this stuff, before we go off to college. And I will say one thing, it was a good research exercise, and it was
Yeah.
good, and kind of knowing what you're dealing with. And so like whenever I read Rest Stop, I was like, I in some ways I wish I still had that knowledge fresh in my mind to
Mm.
read this story and view it through the lens of like what I knew theologically then
Yeah.
to kind of quote unquote get it more. But in a much grander sense, I'm very glad that I've read this at age 26 and not, 17 in Catholic high school. Because I think, to the grand question of like why are we here? Who's controlling the
Mm.
show? Who's doing all this? There's so much, and especially like in our world, from, politics to society in general and just everything that we have going on. It seems like the biggest blanket question, like the why of it all.
Mm.
And I think that's why your writing and my style gets along so well, because I'm a psychology person, so I want to know why too. So I would
Yeah.
love to get to the bottom of it. Um, but I think that your answers, even if we look at Mary and Nestlings, are so like poetic in a way that I and are in ways that I wouldn't necessarily think myself, but I'm so glad to have read.
Mm.
Just especially like with Abe's journey, and like the way that Rest Stop ends, it's a very kind of ominous tone, but it's also really realistic.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, this is what we're dealing with. This is his world now, and he's been affected by this experience. I don't think that you can walk away from these things without being affected. And
Right.
much like you said with your family's experience, we're learning, genetically speaking, trauma is in our DNA.
Yeah.
Um, and I've found that that's like a huge trend, like in a lot of the short fiction that I've been reading recently, a lot of the short stories, is a big uptick I find in like the cyclical familial trauma that we're
Yeah.
experiencing in today's day and age. It's just so fascinating to me because we're seeing it, more and more show up in a scientific way and then like
Right.
literarily as well. It's just like really fascinating to me. It's my
I
little
mean,
nerd
you
spiel
want to
about
know
it, but
you want to know some shit. I said this on a different podcast like a week ago or something like that. So I apologize for bringing some stale material to
oh
you.
no,
But
no.
speaking of that, like so my grandmother was a, a lot. She's a lot like the grandmother in Rest Stop,
Okay.
which I'm just gonna keep gesturing to.
Yes, you should.
She was also slightly the inspiration for Aunt Nadine
Yeah.
in Mary. She was because she always just had like a flower in her hair. She was like very like liked to be as elegant as possible and was just like such an asshole. She was so mean. She was so mean to everybody, especially me and my brother. And just like deeply unpleasant, deeply rude, uh, um, very abrasive, very unapproachable. At least to me, like I think my cousins might have had a different experience with her. Um, but we have a very small family. There's like I don't know 7 of us or something like that, including aunts and cousins and stuff like that. So it was a very small knit group of people, and she was for a while the matriarch of it all, and she was
Yeah.
just such a fucking piece of shit. Um, and so I rarely had anything to do with her. I like didn't like to talk to her. She was very unpleasant to be around. And then I think like something that is like very natural. The older you get, the more you start to just be curious about where you came from
Yeah.
and lineage and ancestry and stuff like that. And by the time that really started to matter to me, I think her health had declined to a point where I couldn't really talk to her anyway. And then she died at some point on that journey, regardless. So like it wasn't an option
Yeah.
to talk to her about that. And I had several decades behind me of like never wanting to talk to her anyway.
Yeah.
So I like never got to ask her these questions or anything like that. But I started to just realize and look at her life story, and it didn't like explain her or it didn't like excuse her
Yeah.
shittiness,
But
but like just thinking of like she came here on a boat from Poland, fleeing persecution to the fucking Lower East Side of Manhattan to like help set up a knish shop with her parents, and kind of live in like abject poverty.
yeah.
Lost her cousins and aunts to the Holocaust, and um, you know had all of that going on, and then was a just a woman in the 40s and 50s
Yeah.
dealing
Yeah.
with that, then
Yeah.
raising 3 kids, and just these sort of like life elements that were like, oh yeah, I kind of wish I could have like spoken to her about how hard life was for her, what that meant to her.
Yeah.
And then the reason why I bring this up, I found out like last year. No, it was this year. It was sometime this year, I think. My aunt, who's like very big into genealogy and ancestry and stuff like that, and has like gone to Poland and Ukraine and like found the villages and mass graves where like
Yeah.
our relatives are and things like that. Just like done the work. But she told me that my great grandfather, so her grandfather,
Mhm.
her mom's dad, was a fucking prisoner of war in a Siberian work camp during World War One.
What the hell? Oh my
Like
god.
straight up Dostoevsky
Oh my
Siberian
god.
prisoner of war. And apparently, as soon as he was released from Siberia,
Yeah.
came home, and that's when my grandmother was conceived, like right
Yeah.
around that time.
No
So
shit.
like
Oh
you
my
you
god.
say that like the genetics contains the trauma, like
Yeah.
she was just fucking full of POW Siberian prisoner camp. And so like it doesn't like it makes me look at her a little bit differently. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I
Well,
still wouldn't want to hang out with her, but like I get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an explanation, and like it is somebody who wants to know the why. It's like it just makes a little more sense. And
Yeah.
like, the thing that we talk about, like with a higher power or whatever, whether it's God, whatever you believe, like to me that cosmic entity with that amount of weight, to me that like
Mm.
exists across generations because it's like you said, like how does this happen? Like how do
Yeah.
we inherit this in this way? And the way that you've examined it in Rest Stop, I think is just really smart and really brilliant.
Well, thank you.
But in that way, like it holds that much kind of similar weight to me, and like in terms of like awe and mystery and wonder, because like I wonder the same things about my family. Like I
Yeah.
have certain family members that we don't necessarily talk to. That I wonder what it means for me. Like
Yeah.
what does this spell out for me that I don't know, or and like what's gonna go with them that we don't know.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I can definitely understand that, and I appreciate the artistic approach that you wrote about it in Rest Stop with. But all of the big philosophical things aside, Rest Stop is nasty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. The snakes and the bugs, they are very effective. I will never look at a gas station bathroom the same. um,
It's good to be prepared, you know?
yeah, yeah. I have to ask, have you ever had an encounter, like, with a snake before that you've had to, worry about removing it from a premise?
I have never myself had to, but
Yeah.
I grew up in Arizona.
I was gonna
You're
say, you grew
in
up in
Texas, right?
I'm in
Oh, you're in
Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know about critters.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, yeah. And Arizona has a whole lot of critters, and they
Yeah.
all can kill you. They all want to kill you. Although there's been a lot of like rehabilitation of people being like rattlesnakes just want to be left alone, and that's maybe true, but also
I don't wanna be the one to
I
find that out.
yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna fuck with a rattlesnake.
No.
Um, I'm not here to rehabilitate the rattlesnake's image. And yeah, I've been on trails. I've been outside and like heard that rattle and known I have to go. Back away very very quickly. And I to this day, I mean, I've been living in New York for
Yeah.
20 years. To this day, I still reflexively dump my boots before I put them on. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't. And the first time you dump your shoes and like a brown recluse comes out of it, you don't change that behavior anymore.
Mm-mm.
Like that's kind of
No.
ingrained. Um, so yeah, like I have been in the same vicinity as
Yeah.
some of these creatures.
Well, you wrote about it very well. Somebody like, I mean, I don't know why, I live with my fiance and, like, it's me every time who finds them. I don't know why. He can walk right by them and
Yeah.
he doesn't see them, but I'm the one who sees them. And sometimes I have to be the one to get rid of them if I'm home alone. And, the way that you wrote about them, very, immersive. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, because you got the eastern diamondbacks in Louisiana, I imagine. You don't have
We've
the
got
western ones.
We probably have, like, an undiscovered hybrid mutant breed with, like, a 3rd fang in the front that it'll
Uh-huh.
probably just, like, kill you upon looking
Right.
at
It's got
you.
like mind venom.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we literally, like, I had, like, a salamander in my pantry on the ground.
Oh.
I was this weekend scared the shit out of me. I'm like,
Oh.
I can't make this up. I can't make this up." Um, but anyway, back to the creepy crawlies. So the whole that feeling of uncomfortableness that you create,
Hmm.
in Rest Stop is through the aid of the creatures, but then also it's like a closed set in a way because it's the gas station bathroom. And leading up to the bathroom is the gas station itself. He's on the road, which is a little bit more expansive, but you make a lot out of one set piece for lack of a better word. Do you want to talk a little bit about was like the active I'm assuming it was an active choice to make this so confined and have
Yeah.
so much happens in such a small space, and I think that that's like an interesting way of approaching those ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I love just on a superficial level, I love stories like that.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to like try my hand at one.
Yeah.
Like I love Gerald's Game. Gerald's Game's
Yeah.
one of my favorite King books. Or stories like The Mist or
Yeah.
Misery. Like I love a good confined space,
Mhm.
locked room sort of story. And that's also very much informed by uh being a playwright and you know, you have a fair amount of flexibility on stage, especially if you're doing it sort of, minimalistically.
Right.
It's not like you're confined to a single room or anything like that. But some of my favorite plays do that, and it's just kind of like we are in this room and we're gonna watch something play out, sometimes in real time.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge for sure, but also a very rewarding one because I think it does feel that much more engaging and immersive and realistic
Oh
because you
yeah.
don't get the benefit of a time jump. You don't get the benefit of a scenery change. Like you are as stuck as the character.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of like internal works and flashbacks and stuff like that that are happening in this. So you do get a little bit of a relief.
Hmm.
But you know, your body is still stuck in this place. And so it becomes a fun challenge to just like get to know the space more. You know,
Yeah.
the bathroom becomes like another character in a way, in that great cliched way.
Yeah.
And like, what can I use in this place? What can save me? What is a danger to me and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, this originally had been. I think I'd known it was going to be a novella first,
Mhm.
but then I quickly, before I wrote it as a novella, broke it as a treatment for a screenplay,
Okay.
and uh, then the pandemic hit, and trying to remember the chronology of this. Uh, it was an interesting thing because there was a period in the pandemic after we'd been going through it for like 8 or 9 months or something like that.
Hmm.
And I was taking a lot of calls with producers and stuff like
Yeah.
that as a screenwriter. Um, and it was with it, I was talking with a producer, and they were asking me for like what ideas I had, what was I working on, and they were like, "Here's what we're especially looking for. We want things with a small cast and that are only indoors." Because
Hmm.
at the time,
Yeah.
in that part of the timeline of the pandemic, we
Right.
thought that that's what was needed. That it
Yeah.
had to be indoors and like just a small little location. And so I was like, "Oh, I have this idea, great!" And they loved it, and they were like, "Oh, wonderful, we really really like that." And then like within like 2 months, I had another call with them, and they were like, uh, "Actually, the only things we want right now are outdoors." And have a big cast so that people are only needing to be called like once in a while, so we don't have to have someone called all the time. And it was like, oh, so you can't use this at all. And it
The
was just
exact
kind of
opposite.
as producers were like figuring out how to roll with guidelines and things like that. So but I still had the treatment.
Hmm.
That just like seemed like such an easy movie or story to
Yeah.
make. And uh, kind of ultimately what wound up happening is I knew that my next novel wasn't going to come out until 2025, and
Hmm.
I didn't have anything on the calendar for 2024. And this would have been at like the end of 2023 when I was making these calculations, and I was like, oh well, I've got like half of this novella written because I started writing it in between Mary and Nestlings. I was like, I should just finish that and then see if I can publish it with an indie publisher that I love. And that was, first immediate choice was Shortwave, and Shortwave was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, great. And so it's coming out. Yeah. So it was a long story short. It was a combination of like artistic ideas and very practical ideas of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I want to do it this way, and also it'd be nice to have this.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed it, and I don't know what it says about me that I immediately clocked. I was like, "Oh, the back of the toilet tank needs to be a weapon."
Oh yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if
that's
I've
heavy
like
shit.
read. I don't know if I've watched too many action movies where that toilet tank is coming handy, but I was like, "Oh, that's where we're gonna go."
Good to know. Good to be prepared.
Yeah, I guess so. And then like one last rest stop related question I have for you. I have to know how in general, the googly eyes. I know in general, like, or I have theories about the symbolism of the eye
Mm,
and watching and all these other good things. But for practical purposes, I mean, I literally got googly eyes in my shortwave box when I got the
yeah.
book. How did you land on, or was it a joint decision for marketing? Like, how do we land on googly eyes?
No, that's a really great question. It's really interesting that you asked that question, because that wasn't a discovery until I think like the second or third draft.
Hmm.
And like now I can't imagine the story without it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Um,
big part of the story in addition to
it
everything
is,
else.
yeah, and for reasons that you touched on too, like very thematically,
Yeah.
it means a lot, and then what happens to the googly eyes as the story progresses,
Yeah.
and what is kind of left in their place also is very important. And basically, how it came about was bear with me as I try and figure out how to say this without spoiling too much. But I knew that there was going to be a mask
Yeah.
involved. I knew that there was going to be a another character in this story
Yeah.
who was going to wear a mask. And that's always a challenging thing because if you're gonna have someone with a mask,
Right.
then that mask has got to be iconic. Like you can't just like have it be just like a little mask. Like there's such a lineage of masks in horror,
Absolutely, yeah.
that I really wanted to come up with something that was worthy of inclusion in that canon. And so I had like four different options that I'd come up with, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and if it were close at hand, I can see the box in which it is currently resting in the closet next to me, but I can't get it. Uh, there was a mask that I got from Target, uh, for just like we live on a street in New York City that is very uh, trick or treat heavy.
Oh,
Like it's a
really? Yeah.
kind of like residential street, and
Yeah.
it like the block gets closed off, and you just
That's
get
really
like
fun though.
it's great. It's
Yeah.
for New York City. It's very suburban.
Yeah.
Like it will get just thousands of kids will
Oh, I
pass
love
through.
that.
Uh, and I was like, oh fuck, I need a mask to wear while like just sitting there with the candy thing. So we found this mask at Target, and it's a mask that's just a bunch of eyes, and
Yeah.
it's so creepy. And especially for people who I don't have this, but it's a very common phobia. The what is it? Trypophobia, the just fear of
Yeah.
like closely connected holes.
I know what you're talking
It can,
about, yeah.
yeah, it can trigger that. And so I like it. It's simple, but it's creepy. And my like top favorite idea for this mask in Rest Stop, I knew it was going to involve an eye because again the thematic kind of resonances that I wanted it to serve. And so for a while it was a giant eyeball. The face was just going to be a giant eyeball,
Yeah.
one singular one. And then there was another version where it was an emoji face with the heart eyes,
Oh God.
which I also thought would be nice and creepy. But then I remembered that mask, and I was like, oh no, maybe it should be a bunch of eyes. Um, and uh, from there, it just kind of naturally progressed of like, oh, maybe it's a homemade mask because it was
Hmm.
hard to like describe what that mask looked like.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, okay, maybe it's a mask that this person made, and like from there, it was just a little hop, skip, and a jump to okay, it's got googly eyes. And yeah, it just every now and then it's always funny that when you're working on a thing, you reach this point where your receptors are just kind of open, and
Yeah.
it can be very woo woo. It can sound like, oh my god, I was fated to
No.
find this thing or this anecdote or something like that. But I think mostly it's just like once you reach a certain commitment to a
Yeah.
project, everything starts informing it.
Oh
And
yeah.
you start looking at everything through that lens. And as soon as I thought of that mask, it just like all clicked. I was like, oh my god, and it feeds this thematic thing, and it feeds that visual, and it just kind of ticked all the boxes I needed to tick. And that was also like just another reason why I was so glad to be with Shortwave on this because
Yeah.
like time wise, if it was like a bigger press, I would have had to have had the manuscript locked by that point.
Right, right.
Um, but because it's an indie press, I was able to like keep experimenting and figuring out until like I found this thing, And then Alan, who runs Shortwave, is so great at design and marketing and stuff like
Yeah,
that. He immediately
no.
picked up on like, oh, well, let's embrace these googly eyes. Like that's wonderful.
No, I think I've said it so many times and I'll just keep saying it, but everything with shortwave is just so well, like every I is dotted, every T is crossed, every
Yeah,
like little piece of dramatic flair is just so well executed. So I love the touch of the googly eyes,
yeah,
but
me too.
I'm glad that that's where it landed mask wise, because I like knowing the story that it just fits
Yeah,
so well in my in like
yeah.
from where I'm sitting. A lot that I know, I didn't write
No,
it,
I'm
but
I'm right there with you. Like it, I cannot imagine it with anything else.
yeah, no, I think it works really well. But so that's it for my rest stop questions. You also have another book coming out with Tor Nightfire
It's
in, is it
true.
April of
April,
25?
April
Yeah.
22, 2025. The week after taxes, I just realized
Oh.
today.
Love that. So it's When the Wolf Comes Home. I it's been described by you, I believe, as kind of like your Terminator 2 novel.
Yeah.
Um you want to go ahead and talk? I don't know. I don't want to push you to say too much. I don't, I want to give you the floor to say what you can say.
Here's how it ends. Uh, yeah,
You heard it here
that's
first.
um, that's kind of a good way to describe it, if I do say so myself. It is it's still very much of a lineage with my other full length books. In fact, like I look at it as kind of forming a trilogy, an unofficial trilogy with Mary and Nestlings.
Hmm.
Um, it's a very character forward, character first sort of story, but I wanted to use a somewhat different structural language and narrative language for this one than the previous two. And I think if I can say so myself, I think Mary and Nestlings are also very distinct from each other. Like
Yeah.
they are wearing their sort of atmospheric influences
Yeah.
very very clearly, I think. And they come from different places as far as like horror subgenres go. And so
Yeah.
I wanted this to also just I wanted it to be like action horror. I
Yeah.
love action horror. I love action. I love thrillers. I love things that have monsters and chases and stuff like that. So I was like, I want it to be that, but obviously like the me version of that. So it's still very much about someone going through a very big dilemma, and it's very personal. There's another probably two revealing of an afterword at the end of like, here's what I was going through when I wrote this book.
No,
Here's my
no.
trauma. Um, but yeah, um, it's about dads. It's my dad book, um, and childhood fear versus
Yeah.
adult fear.
That's so
And
interesting.
yeah, I'm really, really, really excited for people to read it. Like I keep forgetting that it's like 6 months away.
Yeah.
It's like it's done. Like I'm finishing up the layout draft of it right now. Like it's locked and
Right.
ready to go. But like it's traditional publishing moves very slowly. It's a
Yeah.
much bigger operation. And I'm so insanely grateful to be a Nightfire author too. Like I love everything
Yeah.
Nightfire does, and they've done me very right. And this the cover is amazing and stuff like that.
Oh,
Like
I
it's
love that
it,
cover.
it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
So like it's in the best hands it could be in, but I'm also like I want it to come out. It's so
Yeah.
far away.
Yeah, it's
It's torture.
two different beats going there for
Uh-huh.
indie and traditional publishing,
Yeah.
but I have to laugh because I I jokingly started referring to Daniel Krause's Whalefall as the daddy issue whale book,
Hmm.
and then he saw it and he liked it. And now like I've affectionately coined yours to my friends who knew about me saying that. You're like the daddy issue wolf book now. It's like we
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
friends.
Whalefall gets a little shout out in the afterword
Yeah.
as one of the books that is an influence. Yeah. I
I
love a daddy issue book.
Oh, that I'm gonna cry then. Jesus. Okay. I'm preparing myself now. Okay. But no, and like, the same way that you said that Nestlings is kind of distinct from Mary and this is gonna
Mm,
kind of be its own thing. The thread that binds all those, I think, is empathy. Like above all,
mm,
I think like everybody has been in some like and I'm somebody who prefers character driven work, and you've said it, like a lot of your stuff is character driven and character
Yeah.
focused, but I think it's just like that strong sense of empathy. It's like my big soapbox is empathy and horror, and like that's why
Yeah.
horror works. If you're
Same.
doing it right, you're tapping into the right sense of empathy.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really the humanness of it all, that despite all of the weird creatures and monsters and everything else, it's the humans that make it work.
Yeah.
So I'm
I
really,
could not agree more.
yeah, I'm really, really excited for this one. I know that you're excited about it, which makes me excited about it.
it's it's weird also. It's a very weird book. There
I
are
love.
things in it that I'm like, I cannot believe I'm allowed to do this. And I am. We checked. So I can. And they need to happen. Obviously, it's an important part of the book. But yeah, it is. I mean, what you just said, I think, is a very beautiful, concise sort of observation of what makes horror work. Because to me, there is something very like holy about horror. To bring it back to what we were talking about
Yeah,
at the beginning, like I the whole purpose of horror as a genre, I think, is that we are, as far as we know, this is a phrase I say a lot, but we're the only animal that, as far as we know, is aware it's gonna die, and like we
yeah,
walk around with that knowledge all the time, and it's so fucking much. Like we
yeah.
know so many things. We have split the atom. We still have no idea what happens when we die. We don't know if that's it. We don't know if the self can continue, if consciousness continues. We know nothing. And it's terrifying, and it's sad, and it's exhilarating, and it's beautiful, and it's poetic, and it's fucking awful. And horror is, I think, a place where we really get to just acknowledge that,
Yeah,
and be proactive about it, and have some agency with it.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
having empathy, I think, is 100% like the most important thing for horror, because
yeah,
if you can't empathize with someone going through like literally the biggest human dilemma there is, what even is the point of the experience? Like
yeah,
we're all, no matter where we're from, no matter our background or station or anything like that, like we're gonna die, and we gotta
yeah,
fucking wrestle with that. And we're gonna watch others die. Like that's the best case scenario, is that
yeah,
you will watch others die first,
yeah,
before you die. Um, and yeah, so it's like I think horror is a very important spiritual sort of
yeah.
place.
And it's funny that you phrase it like that because, like I said, Catholicism didn't work for me because it just scared the shit out of me. And I'm somebody
Yeah,
with anxiety, and I cannot deal with the constant guilt and, like whatever. And so like you said, like horror in an odd religious way is the safe sandbox that you can
yeah,
play with the ideas without necessarily retribution, and you can throw all the weird shit in there that you want and play around with it to figure out, okay, how am I going to feel about this, and maybe figure out worst case scenario and how I'm going to
right,
feel about that. And then there's like also the community aspect of it, that you have other people who feel the same way as you,
yeah,
and you can all experience it together. And to me, like that's the faith-based thing that I want to subscribe to, is the idea that we
right,
can talk about it without fear of, whatever. We can confront it as best as we can, even though we may not have all the answers. We're better equipped to sit with it and, like be part of it, just
right.
experience it. So yeah, like they got really philosophical and they got really deep on the end there.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, very true. Oh, Nat, thank you so, so much for your time. To kind of
Oh, my
bring
pleasure.
things full circle, I want to just recap everything that you have out this year in general and coming up. So if anybody wants to look for your short works, the chapbooks that are with Shortwave, you can order directly from them. Those are already out in the world. Rest Stop is coming out on October 15th, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, with them. And then When the Wolf
3 weeks.
Comes Home.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh boy.
And then When the Wolf Comes Home is out with Nightfire next year. And then if you want to pick up that lovely story about Elf on the Shelf, it's called Nice. You can get it in The Darkest Night, and edited by Lindy Ryan, and it's out with Crooked Lane Books, I think. Correct? Does that all
Yeah,
sound
it came out
okay?
today.
Yes, today.
Today it just came out. And just because I haven't said this, out loud yet. It's such a fucking good collection.
It
It
is.
is so good.
Yeah, I've like fallen behind on my advanced copy reading, but
Yeah.
I got through all the way through like Haley Piper's story. So I read like Josh's, Haley's, Tim's, and who opened? Oh, Gwendolyn Kais.
Yeah.
I read like those first four last night, and then like I just read yours today to prepare for this. But they are all so good. They are
I
all
love
really,
it
really
so
good
much.
so far.
Rachel Harrison's is great. Clay's will have you looking at a cardboard box in a way you never have before.
Oh God.
Uh, yeah, it's such a great fucking collection. And I say that to someone who hates Christmas and hates
Yeah.
winter. Like it is my least favorite time of year. Uh, but this book makes it better.
Yeah, no, it's very it's not just Christmas. It's very covers a lot of things. Covers a
Yeah,
lot of things. And the
yeah.
little bit that I've read. So it's a really good one. I recommend that one. Is there anything
And
else?
I should say I don't hate I just
No.
hate the omnipresence of Christmas.
No, it's okay. You can say you
It's
can hate Christmas. It's
ugh,
okay. It's a lot.
I'm a Halloween guy.
Me too.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that I missed that you have coming up that I didn't mention?
If you're in New York City,
Yes, okay.
speaking of Clay McLeod Chapman, it was just announced officially that I am going to be doing an evening of music uh, on the set of a play of Clay's that is being produced.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's awesome.
yeah, it's a production company that just started by a bunch of our mutual friends, other horror theater people who I love dearly and who I've worked with a ton of times. And they're doing this new script of Clay's. And on October 25th, the night of October 25th, you can see Clay's show. And then you stick around, and I will be doing like 45 minutes of like murder ballads, and I've got a bunch of like short
Nice.
stories in song format.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, if you want to see me play music live, which I haven't done in a very, very long time, so it could be just a train wreck.
Nah.
But if you want to witness it, that's October 25th, I think,
Okay,
and I think
October
that's it.
25th.
I think
I
that's
need to
it.
figure out if that's gonna be like live stream or recorded somewhere because I would like to see it.
I might eventually trot those songs out on Instagram. For those who follow me on Instagram, I will occasionally do my procrastination playlist where I'll record a song or two. So I'll probably trot those out
Man,
after the fact. I'll let them be exclusive for a moment and then
if
get
you do
narcissistic.
anything like what Brian McCauley's doing, I don't know how that man has got like my cry playlist, but every
Oh
song that
yeah.
he plays, I'm like, oh, Brian, I'm like sitting at
Oh
work and
yeah.
I'm crying at my desk. Oh man. Well, thank you so, so much, Nat. I'm so excited
Anytime.
for everything to be released eventually and everything that I've read so far has just been so great. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure to get to talk to you. And until next time, all the best.
Yay. Have a good night.
Yes, you too.